You see, something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got back the man himself. I got Carl the Crusher. I've had him on a few times before. It's always somebody I love having chats with. I feel like he kind of looks at situations a little bit differently, a little bit outside the box, and I always like talking to people who do that. Always have a good conversation. You may not know him, but he has been on the show in the past. I know I have a lot of like new listeners and subscribers recently, so it's been a bit. So, Carl, if you can, I'm going to introduce you now. Let everybody know, besides where they can find your work, I guess maybe give people a little bit of an idea of like kind of like what you're into and what you're doing, and then we'll get into the show.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I appreciate you having me back on. I've been doing a lot, so I kind of got into what I'm doing now just naturally as a filmmaker, going out and filming my life day to day. And when I moved down to southern Utah, I really took an interest in a lot of the ancient locations around my area, like the ancient petroglyphs and dwelling sites and indigenous spots. And so I started going to those locations and having experiences at them and documenting them. And that connected me with a lot of interesting people. And one thing led to another. And I've been up to Skinwalker Ranch and to other locations and all across Utah, southern Utah, clear over to the Grand Canyon and past there into Arizona, down into Nevada, Area 51, all over the place.
That's right.
And
tell me about that.
yeah, done a lot of cool stuff. And so I've just kind of got sucked into all this and had experiences and seen a lot of things, been a lot of places, and then have wound up on a spin-off History Channel show called Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, where there's a location in Nevada that's really fascinating, all connected with the original Skinwalker Ranch. So yeah, it's really swept me up over the last several years. And that's kind of a lot of what I do is like looking into the secrets of UFOs, the UFO recovery programs, all this stuff going on in Congress, the talk about metamaterials and biological materials. And I'm really fascinated in like, well, where did this happen? Where did they get it from? Who were the people involved? And how can I go there and get more proof?
Yeah,
and so that's kind of what I've been into.
Nice. Something I know you had mentioned earlier, like you right now you're having a premiere for something that is rather old. You said it was like 13 years ago almost.
Yeah, filmed clear back in 2013. Yeah.
Besides that, was Skinwalker Ranch kind of like was that like one of your first bigger things or your first real things after coming back from doing that?
As an adult, yeah. You know, I was an experiencer and had a lot of things happen in my childhood growing up, but when I got like into high school, I tried to bury a lot of it and suppress it through my beliefs in religion and things like that at the time. And so a lot of that I kind of just suppressed and pushed on with my life into adulthood, especially when I got married and had kids and things. But then when my dad started struggling with dementia and I started questioning things in my religion and faith and all that, it sort of led me down this path of like, well, then what is true, you know? And so then when I started going down that path, you know, I had sort of what you would consider like paranormal experiences after my father passed away and at a couple of ancient petroglyph sites. And then when I went to Skinwalker Ranch, that was my first like kind of real cerebral cognitive experience where I saw what I would call a shadow figure, and then had a really invasive experience with my mind and my thought processes that kind of like I felt like super confused, like I couldn't keep my thoughts straight or find any of my equipment in my bag and all kinds of weird stuff like that. And that went on for a few days. And then I had these strange electrical things that followed me around my house with smoke alarms going off and things like that. That was kind of weird, but that to me was sort of validating, but also, you know, posed a lot more questions to me. It was like, was this like a government experiment? Was it technology? Did I get spoofed or some mind control MK Ultra thing? Or is this like, is the Skinwalker phenomena real? Was this like a paranormal experience that explains some of my childhood encounters and things that have happened. So I kind of like look at both and try to go into it to see what happens. But yeah, clear back in 2013 when I went on that first trip to California, like I was still a member of the Mormon church and married and everything back then. And my whole perspective on this was completely different. My understanding of consciousness, and I didn't understand meditation or quantum physics or string theory or anything like that that could play a part of it. I was just very pragmatic, like Bigfoot's an animal and I'm going to go catch one kind of an attitude. You know? I was pretty ignorant. Yeah.
I know what you mean.
But yeah, my first like real experience that kind of tied a lot of things together and sent me on this path, I would definitely say, was when I went up to Skinwalker Ranch alone and tried to stay out on the edge between the reservation on the south side of Skinwalker Ranch, between reservation land, some of the oil drilling rigs out there, and then right on the south edge of the border of Skinwalker Ranch is where the chain link fence is there, or not the chain link, the barbed wire. But yeah, that's when I had a kind of a weird experience there, and
I remember
sent me down this path.
Yeah, I even remember. I think at one point, you talking about having experiences there, meditating too, right, and stuff like that. Like I think I remember one time when you were on, like you seemed to. What I got out of it is that you might have actually had some pretty serious spiritual, I guess, experiences even there. I guess on your own, doing your own thing.
Yeah, when I go out alone, that's kind of how I started a lot of it. Is when I started to learn meditation, and I got into like the Monroe Institute's Gateway method, and tried to learn like my own version of remote viewing and all that. So I got into that, and right about that same time was when Stephen Greer came out with his CE5 contact method, you know, where you can download an app and play the music or whatever. And it's not so much that I was using his system. I did try it and use it a little bit, but it sort of like added an idea into what I was already doing with the Gateway method and with the other Buddhist methods in meditation that I was doing. And when I put all of that together like a formula, it's almost like a mode of contact. It became like a form of approaching the phenomena on my own terms rather than just having it happen to me, you know, like on random occasions. Suddenly I was like, okay, instead of things just randomly occurring to me, I want to go to them. I want to go to these locations and knock on their front door and see what happens. You know, if they communicate telepathically or through other dimensions or forms of communication through the subconscious or through these altered states of consciousness, you know, between being awake and asleep, these different meditative states, then I'm all about exploring those different like levels of consciousness and trying to get into making contact there for sure.
Yeah, that was like kind of one of the things that I thought maybe set you aside, or at least I'm sure there's other people who are into it, but maybe sometimes they're a little bit afraid to come out and talk about it because people think it's woo-woo. That's why I thought it was a little bit different with you. At least like you're pretty open about it, and you were into that stuff. And I was like, not everybody kind of takes that approach with this stuff.
There's a stigma that I had to deal with even as a kid. Like, so the first experiences that I had that were very much like sleep paralysis, where I would wake up and be like paralyzed in my bed, and there'd be this shadow thing standing in the corner of the room, like this old witch looking lady or a man standing there. And then I'd have this whole like out of body crazy experience. And the way that was always put to me, that it was like had to do with demons or evil spirits, or that there was something that I was wrong with me.
Yeah, it's your fault. Yeah.
I was a bad kid, like, you know, like you know, where I'm possessed or I'm attracting this to me because of something I did. So I had all these paradoxes in my head, blaming myself and trying to suppress it and just terrified. Where as an adult, when I kind of got out of that whole Truman Show and started exploring reality and consciousness and everything more openly, then like I said, it's like instead of being afraid of it, like, oh, if I dabble with this stuff, it's like a Ouija board that's going to attract these demons to get me. I was more of the attitude and the approach that like, look, this stuff has been part of my life since I was like 11 years old, since I can remember. Now I finally just want to like approach it and master this, or like get a grip on it instead of just being a victim. You know what I mean? I want to do things on my own terms. If it happens again, I want to be able to like deal with it right in the face, or have control of my own awareness or consciousness, regardless of what I feel like I'm experiencing or whatever.
I like that.
And that has really given me the tools to where I'm not like afraid of it anymore, and have more grips on it and understanding to all of it. Way different than when I first started down this path.
I love it, man. That's great. That's great. That like reminds me a little bit. I know I bring this movie up a lot. I haven't in probably a few months, but in Apocalypse Now, you know, at one point, you know, the main guy at the end, I forgot his name, but like he's saying that you have to make friends with fear. You know, you cannot let it control you, basically. You know.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of like what you're saying. You kind of did within just, or what you're try to accomplish. You know, you couldn't let it rule you anymore. That situation.
Yeah, these are experiences and tools now to where instead of just like going to bed at night and being afraid that something's going to show up, I'm going to be paralyzed and I'm going to get taken out of my body or something. Now it's like I have the cognitive abilities to create sort of like mind rooms or holographic spaces within my consciousness that where I have doors and
did you get that from the gateway?
Passwords and gateway things to where I've got like containment fields and I have barriers and I have tools and I have ways to get out of situations and to take control or change my size or perception and things like that, to where if I go out of body, it's like kind of like I know it's hard for people to grasp, but it's sort of like you would see like a Jedi being like, I'll be more powerful than you can imagine. It's like, but you don't get a grip on that until you get a grip on it, until you aren't afraid of it anymore. And to me, I've come to terms with it now by realizing a lot of these experiences are just part of, I think, our human evolution and our path to understand where we're headed in the future, and our understanding of the cosmos and our consciousness and how we're expanding into these other dimensions. And we're going to just experience it like this until we get, like you said, a grip on our fears and can face it.
Oh, it's well said, man. Well said. I know we were going to kind of like go into some Mal Wilson stuff, but if you don't mind, I might want to stay talking a little bit about this a little more, because I do love this talking. It's not like you can talk about this shit with everybody, so I want to take advantage of it, you know. I know you had mentioned the gateway before, and when you were just saying right now, I'm very intrigued and impressed by those tapes. I have played with them myself, and I definitely think there's something to them. And from what I got out of from the few that I did in the series, you kind of create like your own barrier. So when you were explaining before, I was like, that's why I said gateway. I was like, that sounded like very much like a gateway. Was that kind of like a technique that you kind of got from the gateway tapes, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so there's definitely different levels and tools and techniques. Like, for example, one of the first things that you learn in that gateway method is to utilize what they call an energy conversion box.
Yeah, the box. Yes. Yeah. I love that.
It's like an imaginary box that while you're doing the meditation and you're doing like this Buddhist chant, and there's this frequency playing between your two ears to balance the hemispheres of your brain from left to right. It puts you kind of like in this Zen state, like a monk, like a Buddhist monk, really open, clear. And then there's this visualization process, that an imagination that you do where you visualize you're in this empty space, and ahead of you is like this box that has a big heavy lid, and you can imagine any kind of box that you want. And you go up to it and basically lift the lid and imagine all of your problems, negativity, any issues that you've got in your life, if it's money, relationships, or whatever, even if it's your own thoughts or mental health or whatever. And you imagine that symbolically as something outside of yourself, like a symbol or even energy or dark matter or whatever. And you just put it in that box and you close the lid. And the idea is that that box represents like the power of the universe or God's energy and pure love or whatever, to where whatever you put in there, it's going to just solve. And when you open the lid next time, the only thing that can come out is the solutions or the answers that you need. And all that is even if it's a placebo, is it creates like this visualization realm to where if you get really into it, you immerse yourself in the experience, you know, when you're alone and you get real deep with it and you imagine it like it's real, then, you know, you go into this and it actually your brain and your mind doesn't know the difference, you know, if it's real or not. At that point, it doesn't matter. The effects are the same. You find the results that you're looking for because there you have a new tool, this box that you can take your problems to. And basically the gateway process is just levels and levels of that, like all the way up into the, you know, level 32 or whatever, where you're actually, you know, making contact with other dimensions and or with dead relatives and all kinds of different stuff. So as you go through the process, you know, you do things like build up your aura to protect yourself.
Yeah, I remember that.
You change your color energy and stuff. You learn how to go up into different dimensions of vibration and clarity and sort of like free roam and go out of body and remote view around. And then it gets really interesting in the higher levels where you're like imagining doors, gates, and things that you open that are like waiting rooms or passageways into other dimensions or other timelines to go other places and stuff. And that's where the CIA got involved in all of it and all that. Yeah.
That's really interesting that you say that because I have, you know, theories or ideas, you know, on experiences that I've had where, you know, in deep meditations, eventually I'll get to a point where it looks like almost like cellophane windows are going across me. And it looks like different times or what. It just doesn't, it's not where I am now if I was to open up my eyes. And I have often wondered, like, if you were to actually fully immerse yourself into that scenery, are you actually going somewhere else?
Yeah, like in Old Norse mythology, they call that the Rainbow Bridge or the Bifrost, you know?
Or it's like OA. Do you ever see that OA when people are like jumping timelines? I was like, yo.
Yeah. I've had the same experience. I've drawn pictures of it and even done like audio recordings where I've done the gateway method and gone into these meditations. And then it's like I step through this doorway that's like a crystal, like a prism doorway into another dimension. There's like a version of myself as from the future, and there's like a version of myself as a child, and we're on like this like crazy reflective rainbow bridge, and there's all these windows and doorways that go to alternate parallel realities of my life along the way that I can go and look through, or where I need to, almost like quantum leap or something weird like that. But yeah, I've had experiences like that too. And, you know, you come out of it, and at the same time, it's like you don't know if it's real or not or whatever, but the more you study about, you know, like quantum physics and the true nature of consciousness and things, we learn that our consciousness is actually non-local to the body, meaning like what we think of as our mind and our thoughts are really not just in our brain. It's like a field or an aura, a toroidal field of energy that flows around us almost in an 8-foot sphere. And so we're connected to like everything. And like, so it's a lot more different when you think about like, you know, maybe our body is more just like an antenna receiving a signal from outside somewhere, and we just perceive everything the way that it is. And so it's kind of interesting.
I like how you say that. Yeah, I think some ways it's just, you know, we're receiving that signal, and it just depends on how our brain and our eyes want to perceive it in a sense, you know. Wow, that's
which is very limited. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. That's wild that you see, you know, these are, you mentioned, you know, kind of having like the same experience just in like, I guess in your own way. And I have, you know, said this numerous times. I think there are certain markers or certain consistent things that happen when people have these experiences. And I think it could be, in my opinion, at this point, like what we were describing, I think you're kind of in that middle point of where you might start, actually, my opinion, you'll start going somewhere else. I think still in that stage, you're still kind of using your own brain to really get an idea or grasp what's going on. So I think maybe that's why, you know, yours might look a little bit different than mine, because you just, that's how your brain is programmed to try to figure out that scenario, but we're still having a common experience. And I do think like I've mentioned this before, and I'm not trying to say we're saints, but I've mentioned this before, you know, with covering certain saints from the church. You know, the reason that they even, you know, get that title is because they have these experiences, then supposedly somebody checks and deems it authentic. And I know sometimes a lot of people are like, oh, it's probably bullshit, the church, blah, blah, blah. But I do believe that there's certain markers that people will actually be like, yes, you've had the same experience. You know what I'm saying? I think that's why we kind of had to say, I've never said that to you. I mean, I've mentioned it before on my show, but I've never told you that scenario before. And you were like, oh, yeah, it sounds like blah, blah, blah. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I've had that experience enough that I've kind of stopped questioning a lot of that synchronicity. Like I've had a conversation with my friend Brent and another one, you know, with my friend Roger, and where I've like opened up and shared, like when I was sitting at a petroglyph site and had like a whole vision. And so I was feeling like really vulnerable in a moment. I was like, I got to tell somebody about this. And I've told a couple of my friends, and they've turned around like the one time, pulled a book off the shelf that was like The Way of the Shaman or something. And they like flipped through the book and basically read a whole chapter off, showing me pictures of what had just happened to me like the night before. Was like in this whole book was like a shamanistic initiation vision thing that happens to people. And I was like at this petroglyph site, and all these pieces come together and stuff, weird stuff like that's happened, to where like to me the experience was just like a trauma until I got that understanding. Like, wow, this is a, you know what I mean? Like I was
that's a really good way to put it though. Holy shit. That's why I've said to people before, I think if you're gonna fuck with magic to this extent, you got to make sure your mind's right beforehand, because you could really be fucked up afterwards. And like you just said, it's almost like you're traumatized until you make sense of what just happened. You're like, what the fuck?
When you have like a full-blown paranormal hijack experience where you're like caught up in a whole, where you're sitting there awake in the dark at like an ancient location, and where there's all these petroglyphs and ancient carvings, and you're looking up at the stars and stuff and sitting there alone. And then you get caught up in like a vision, and you can't stop it or control where it goes. And like crazy things happen where you're like burned on a bonfire, and your internal organs are pulled out and burned and cleaned and washed and stuffed back in. Is like a very violent experience. Ooh. Like I felt like I was being murdered, but it was like a dream that I couldn't stop. And then all of a sudden I'm like back just sitting on the rock. Like, what the fuck just happened to me? You know, all this missing time, just crazy stuff like that. Ooh. And you wonder if you're like, wow, is there just some like radiation coming out of these rocks to just like dose me? Or like, am I just sitting here just like zoned out, or what the hell just happened to me? So you go, you know, trust somebody.
You just get hit with the direct energy weapon.
Right. Yeah. But then when I tell somebody that story, and then they pull that book off the shelf, they're like, oh, this is like an old Navajo like initiation thing. There's lots of people who have had that vision, you know. I'm like, oh wow, like I had no idea. And then they tell you what it means and all that stuff, and then you don't feel so crazy, you know.
Yeah, I've even noticed that like certain things, like even in Native American or in art, there's been times where it's like I'll be like, I've seen that before. Yeah. You know, and then you're like, holy shit, like even they were saying this, you know, trying to express it. Like, holy shit, like, and you know, and it will be in all different, again, like the pyramids all over the world. They didn't have emails, and I don't think they were sending pigeons with letters. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. But again, maybe if you got these ideas or these visions from these experiences that you had that inspired you now to build these things, if there's a collective consciousness that people tap into, that's how I think we have somewhat same experiences, and you see the same shit in different areas of the world.
It transcends time. Like me sitting there and the shaman sitting there 2,000 years before me, the timeline, if I'm sitting on the same rock in the same headspace and looking at the stars, like that quantum entanglement of consciousness could arc across that 2,000-year gap, and the distance becomes a zero, and suddenly it's like we're sitting in the same space. And could be the same thing that, you know, hundreds of people have experienced before me, and why that stuff's even carved on the rocks to begin with, all these false doorways and petroglyphs of people coming out of spirals and going up into the sky and down and all this crazy stuff. And you're right. It's like even just going to these spots and looking at these sites and opening up your mind to wondering what they mean, even just that, like, is sort of like retuning your antenna to that signal and to pick it up, just even by looking at it, by being in there in that energy and respecting it in the right way. It's just like turning the dial on the radio to pick up that frequency, especially if you stay alone after dark and you are treat it the right way and approach it the right way. And you're going in there armed with your consciousness ready, not to just like have things happen to you, but you know how to go, you know, up to the door and knock and things like that, like how to approach them, sort of that type of a mindset.
Very nice. You mentioned before too something about, I guess, was that the CE5? Did you feel like that was kind of something that I mean, I've checked it out. I don't think I downloaded the app, but I did like wonder if that was kind of like almost like a mass group of people doing the gateway to, almost in a sense, kind of like doing the gateway together, you know, and kind of, I guess, working together, if they realize it or not, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So the one here, I'll just say this much. So the aspect of the CE5 that I think is effective, that I really like, that I took from the CE5 and that I use, I don't use Stephen Greer's audio meditations. I don't use his crop circle noises. I don't use any of that.
His
I don't
crop
even think
circle
it really,
noises?
yeah, those chirps are supposed to be like digital interpretations of what crop circles sound like if you like took the glyphs and
Oh,
interpreted them.
yes.
Like, I don't know how you extrapolate that. So it
you know
all
what-
seems like a big guess to me. But
You know what's funny? I had a friend or somebody. Well, I was close to when I was in the OTO, and he used to be big into like making beats. And he was telling me that he had a program that he was like, dude, he's like, you can actually take like sigils and like throw it into like this program, and like somehow will make like sound out of it. So I'm assuming
That
you could
must
be
be
using
what
the
they
same
did.
thing with crop circle images. Yeah.
this idea that you reverse the idea of cymatics, you know, like when you put sand or oil or water on top of like a speaker and then you vibrate it and it produces almost
Yes.
like snowflake images, those sacred geometry symbols. Like if you reverse that, you take the crop circles or different glyphs or whatever and interpret that back into sound, that's supposed to be what the CE5 chirps and noises are from crop circles or whatever. But I don't know what crop circles or whatever. What I like from CE5 is the way that he approaches the version of remote viewing is like a reversal method, which I thought was pretty innovative of Stephen Greer. I think he got it probably from Stanford Research Institute and the other remote viewers, but it's basically a reversal method where normally in remote viewing, like if I wanted to try and do psychic spying and go through a protocol to try and see what you've got like hidden in a shoebox up in your closet or something in your bedroom, I could spend like a few weeks and try to spy on you and do that. But imagine if I tried to reverse it and I tried to send you a telepathic message to know exactly what I had hidden in my closet. That's like reversing the message, you know? So the idea of CE5 is that you get a group of people together, and instead of like trying to see where UFOs are and just look up at the sky and try to spot something, you reverse it all almost like Google Earth, and you send out a group telepathic message through a group meditation where you tell anything paying attention out there exactly where you are and where you want to see them. So that anything in the past or the future or any kind of ability or has the technology to hear you, when you get together and think about all that together, you visualize like all together exactly where you're sitting, all in a group, and that this is where you all are and that you're open to an experience. And then sometimes like weird stuff happens, like as a group where you see some stuff move in the sky or weird things like that. But
Actually,
that part of it, I kind of add into my work.
that makes, I could see that working though. I actually totally forgot that's. I remember that's how he did it. It was kind of almost like they were like, you know, almost like a beacon, kind of like, you know, we're here, we're, you know, trying to, which would then allow them, I guess, to come to you if they wanted to. Correct?
Yeah, he even does it where you imagine almost like you're in outer space looking down at the earth, and then you slowly float in all the way down and into through the clouds, and then right down where you can see above the city that you're in, or exactly where you're at as the group. And then you just keep going down and down and down to right where you're sitting. And you just project that out reverse, like into space or out into other dimensions, like right where you're at.
That's interesting that now you're saying it's reversed because from my experience, and now, whatever, I'm not claiming careers into whatever, but from my experience, when I was into meditations and learning it from people like in the magic or the occult community, I think there was like certain meditations. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's like a lot of times it was always suggested to kind of like you almost leaving the earth and going up.
Yes.
So like when you were describing to me, I was like, oh, that's like the backwards version of like a beginner's meditation visual, actually.
It's totally counterintuitive to put a signal out to all dimensions of reality and to anything that can hear you or pay attention and say, here I am. And that's kind of what CE5 does, is it flips all that around. Normally in remote viewing, astral projection, out-of-body experiences, you're kind of flying around literally like a fly on the wall or like a ghost in the corner, having these different dreamlike dimensional experiences, almost like you're spying on things where nobody knows you're there. You're like a ghost in the room. But with CE5 and this contact protocol and reverse remote viewing method, you're literally like, hey, there's 30 of us here, and this is our exact GPS coordinates, exact where we are. We want you to come to us. So you flip the whole concept on its head, and then you do that all together. So I kind of like go out to historical locations where paranormal things are known to happen. And I kind of do that like either alone, or I do that with scientific equipment, night vision, thermal gear, or if I'm with a group, I'll try to do that protocol and have like EEG brain scanning equipment on to try and record my brain waves and all that. So we've done all that. Yeah.
Oh, that's some gangster shit right there.
Yeah, because it's one thing to like have a vision and feel like you just had a conversation with someone from another timeline, and come back with information. And that all just sounds like a story you imagined in your head, unless you can record the brainwave activity and get some level of evidence that like, okay, Carl is like sitting in this ancient cave and he's doing a meditation. But even though we're all being quiet and his eyes are closed and nobody's talking to him, like you can see that my occipital lobe is going, my hippocampus is going, and my brain is convinced I'm having a total conversation and seeing and talking to someone, even though I'm just sitting there by myself.
See, the hippocampus is what connects both sides of the brain, though, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe you are having a conversation up in there.
Well, that's the whole thing is like, yeah, how do you validate it in things, or what can you get any information that you then follow up on and prove out or find artifacts, or
the left and the right side of the brain are trying to make sense of things, maybe.
It could be, yeah. But it's also, maybe
Playing
that's
Pong.
also the experience of tuning the radio to where, that requires us getting that synchronicity to open up the antenna,
Yeah, exactly, with the hemi-syncing, really, with the music, too, and the sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing that, playing the two different types of audio, different levels of magnetism within the headsets, and that like goes through the brain and causes an equilibrium to occur where you go way more relaxed and way more open instead of just like trapped in your default mode in your mind. Yeah.
That's some wild stuff, man. You got that. Have you it's something that I know I've been talking about doing for a while, and I think I'm really going to start maybe next week, but have you ever tried like meditating and filming yourself with the thermal to see if you've ever gotten any like weird results?
That's an interesting one. In fact, I've just been kind of like thinking about doing that and these other sort of motion visual experiments. I was just learning this one today and tried to reach out to this other creator who's developed a method of like setting just even a normal camera up on a tripod. You can put it in like an empty room, and there's a way of like overlaying and inverting the colors and displacing the timeline to where it can reveal like anomalous movement and like weird shadow movement and things that you normally wouldn't see. So I'm starting to look into all of that to try and get experiences, but that would be a really cool one to do I have not done that yet with the thermal. I've done stuff with dicyanin goggles and other different things, but yeah, filming myself, like setting up the thermal and going and sitting and like doing it. That's a good idea. I'll have to do that.
Yeah, I got the thermal, the one that you suggested. So
Yeah,
it's like
man.
half my getup is like, I ask you, what do you suggest for this? All right, I'll get that.
That's good. It probably saves you a bunch, and because I've got like a whole garage.
No, that
full.
thermal's really good though. Oh yeah, that's true too. Like you've already been there and done that. That's why I ask you.
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I've made the mistake of buying several pieces of junk before I got stuff that I actually like.
I remember like even recently I had asked you something. You're like, you know what? Everything that I've kind of had with that is I'm really not too happy with it, so I can't tell you. And I was like, thank you. You know.
Yeah, I haven't had great success. Yeah, if I don't know, I don't know for sure.
But yeah, I think it was the Hick. I don't even know how to say it anymore. But yeah, I got the same thermal that you suggested, and I was thinking about using it. And that thermal is really that's actually when I really started looking into it. Like you saying save money, you actually probably would save money buying that one than other ones because it actually has like an extra camera, so then it does like detail, you know, and stuff, and like it's hours of, you know.
It even does the audio. It attaches right to a handle or a tripod or whatever. And I really liked it. I was surprised when I went out there and got it. Like, and it's flat, so really you could slide it right in your pocket and carry it. And to me, I'm all about like how much can I take?
So you don't need a gigantic
backpack. Small backpack, because a lot of times I'm hiking, 10,000 feet up a mountain or something like all day. It's like crazy. So if I'm going way back in the desert, I don't want to have to carry big laptops and heavy gear. I want stuff compact and light and to work,
Yeah.
And so I've had to figure that out the hard way. I've broken a lot of shit for sure.
No, I remember you even telling me that, and that was always like a thought that I had in my mind because, I mean, even just some of the little things that I have done already, and, I haven't taken all the equipment with me, but like I've gone to Yale like numerous times to try to do a documentary out there and been filming a lot. I'm obviously not taking all my paranormal stuff with me, but like I even remember from you telling me in the past on the show, you eventually, if you're going to start trekking with stuff, you're going to try to figure out, the best stuff to carry just so you're not lugging tons of crap.
Yeah.
And that was one of
the point
I always thought
where
about
I'm
that.
like, I'll take a plastic water bottle, the small ones like that you get at the gas station or whatever. Cause as soon as you're done drinking it, I want to smash that down flat and put it in there. Cause I don't want all that weight and bulk and all that crap. When you're up there hiking around and trying to film and breathing heavy and everything, like all that.
No, I know what
up,
it's like, dude. Yeah. Those cameras get heavy too after a while. But yeah. So I was starting to think about possibly doing that myself eventually, because I do think I do think it's quite possible you might pick something up for sure. And I think the main part, I guess, was like, I do believe it's possible. I know it probably isn't going to happen like that. I might have to actually, get into meditation more than I have been. But I think it's more of the fear of like actually having it and then being like, oh, now I got to show it and hope people don't think I'm lying or I'm crazy. You know what I'm saying?
The club. Yeah, you catch it, man. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, oh, he's possessed now. And I'm like, oh, it's some crazy, stupid shit. But
I've kind of gotten over that fear, luckily. I'm just kind of like, whatever. Like, I'm okay with it. Like, if I'm wrong and people if I capture something on camera and then they debunk it, and then ultimately they're like, I think that was a bug. It's not an orb or whatever. That stuff doesn't really bother me. And I don't think I really put myself out there enough, unless I'm pretty perplexed, where I'm like, I really don't know what this is, and this is crazy to me. I'll say that and admit it. But as soon as I know what it is, if it has a rational explanation, I'm totally okay realizing I'm wrong and owning up to that. But yeah, you have to be okay with that. But like, I definitely have stuff that I filmed and that I've got that I think is super weird that I haven't really put out there, and I've been shown stuff, and it's just because I'm like, I know what people would do to it. Like, it fits with what's happened to me or what I've seen, but nobody else is going to understand it. So, I'll just keep this to myself.
Yeah, there you go. I understand.
That's okay.
Yeah. So something we were talking about before, and I started to forget about it, and I don't want to forget. These, I guess it's kind of like the CE5 made me think about it in a sense, and I guess like the gateway. Like, I guess like with the whole thing, I guess with the CE5 is to get like, they're hoping eventually they'll get contact or they'll see something. Have you ever thought, or like, I mean, like with Jack Parsons, when he was doing his Babylon workings, there was supposedly a lot of UFO sightings. Places that now, just because, like places that Crowley's been to. Now, I'm not saying it's because Crowley's been there. For all you know, there was something up with that area, and he understood that. But like you get some places where like known occultists or magicians go to that in the past that have had UFO sightings. It's in my opinion that I think sometimes maybe if you're getting into like a magical space, or like if you're getting into that deep meditation and like maybe you go off somewhere, sometimes I do think that maybe you might get those visuals from like kind of like what's going on. Like it may not actually be necessarily like extraterrestrials. It's maybe more of what's going on with you in that area. I don't know how to explain it. It's like a side effect of like the magical situation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that there's totally something to that. Like Jack Parsons, he was doing a type of, they just say black magic, but it was a type of Enochian magic.
Yes,
where they use a crystal ball, a black crystal ball, just like I've got here. And they have this whole like sacred geometric symbol with these sigils all around it. And then it was like is it Edward Kelly? John D. and Edward Kelly, clear back in England. They developed like this form of occult Enochian magic, where they were using the crystal ball, going to like a trance state, and then having contact with these entities that were delivering communication to them and taught them this other language and about ancient cultures and all this stuff and remote viewing and all this crazy stuff. And that's become like a whole thing of, like scrying, where you look into a magic crystal ball or magic rock or whatever to open up your consciousness to perceive other dimensions and gather information. And Nikola Tesla was into versions of this. Jack Parsons was doing it. L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons were buddies, with Aleister Crowley. They would all like hang out and write science fiction books and build rockets and bombs and stuff. They're like crazy, like wizards and stuff, like literally doing cult magic things down in Jack Parsons' house parties and stuff. And so,
he turned that's the Jet Propulsion Labs. Yeah, and I think for a while he had like the lodge at his house. Like he had an OTO lodge too. So I mean, that's what all that Strange Angel show was about.
Totally open about it. So it's kind of like that whole idea of like, what is it if we get over being afraid of the Ouija board effect, and you take it from being a board game on the table where you're goofing around, dabbling with things, and you say, wait, within my own mind and my own body is already built in it like a universal Ouija board that does the same thing. So I'm going to use these methods like the gateway method and remote viewing and these other forms of Buddhist meditation to go inside myself and set myself up with different rooms and doorways and tools to basically do the same thing and get a grip on all this, instead of just being like a ghost in the machine, or just, whatever, where you're just lost in the fog and having experiences you can't explain. It's kind of like, I'm going to go into the guts of this and figure this out. If this stuff is happening to me, how can I make contact? And so that's the whole idea is, like, how do you go to a place where people have it happen a lot? Like, it seems like there's a heightened experience, or maybe something geologically where our reality is more thin or loose, or has some of these crinkles to it where paranormal things occur. And then try to go in there with the tools required to be safe, but also to dig into it, not only physically, but psychologically, and through what we would call like telepathy or out of body contact and stuff like that. So I put myself in those situations and try to kind of see what happens. like almost like bait on a hook a little bit to go out there and do that. But I feel like it happens to me and has happened to me in my life regardless, even when I was a kid. So what difference does it make? I would much rather be armed. I'd much rather go in like special forces spiritually and cognitively and with my own tools and meditations in place rather than just go, like we said earlier, just go have it happen to me anyways. So, but yeah, it's hard to know. I've gone down this path even to wonder, when I was a kid, was some of it carbon monoxide? When the times when I had my room in the basement, was it this or was it that? Was it my diet, parasites? I better do a parasite cleanse to see, like, what if it's this? I better go get mental health screened to make sure I'm not schizophrenic. And so I look into all that stuff. I'm not afraid to go check, and make sure. And, but the synchronicities. And as I keep going, there seems to be a reality to all this and the phenomena where there's something connected to us as humans and as our consciousness evolves that is starting to make contact with these other dimensions of reality that are not so stuck in a linear timeline like we are. They're just beyond that. They're a little bit more extra dimensional, and their reality we might consider more like a spirit realm or this a ghost realm, but it's really like different frequency layers of reality, almost just like you would save a bunch of different music albums on a hard drive or on an iPod. Reality has multiple different tracks that you can go through and experience, and it's just like this universal infinite space that we don't need our body to go through necessarily. But I think that's what we're all gearing up to, is really ultimately like facing our own death and experiencing what comes next after we die. Like coming out, just like a caterpillar coming out of a cocoon, we're going to go into this non-physical dimension of reality. And the more you understand all of that and how to traverse it and harness that, I feel like the better off we're going to be. Either that or it's not going to matter. One or the other.
That's a good point. That or it doesn't matter. Oh, before you had mentioned, and I think you even kind of said it now, you might have used the same word, I already forgot what it was. But what I got out of it is have you had what I got out of what you were saying before at one point, have you had like same experiences, like the same, it's like, all right, what I was getting at before when I see, when I was explaining, seeing the things on the wall. There are like certain things that just seem to always happen now whenever I go into this state. It's almost like I know there's just like a series of visuals and experiences. Is that what you were kind of getting at before, that you have seen it so many times you're not even confused about it? You just know it's like a part of it, or that's just part of it? Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. There's certain patterns to the experience. Like for me, that originally and going through my life, a lot of times were just like, scary, or I didn't understand or whatever. Like, for example, like a sleep paralysis experience would a lot of times, like I'm just falling asleep and then it's all of a sudden like I pop back awake and I'm aware in my bedroom again, but I can't move my body. I can just like open my eyes and look around and kind of be aware of the room around me. But I feel like I can't move. I can barely breathe. Like my body isn't really there, like attached very well. And like at the same time, there's this rhythmic vibration, like a that's like feels like it's coming from deep inside the earth, almost like the heartbeat of the earth, or like there's a train going really deep underground. And I would just, growing up, I would just like panic and try to build up the courage and try to move my feet, my fingers, and then it would turn into like a whole nightmare where I would see this shadow thing move by the bed, or this thing standing over me, or climb right up on top of me on the bed. And then I would just like, in the panic, it was like I would pop into this like a vision or a dream that was all psychedelic, like I'm flying through outer space and different stuff, or I'm like in a room with all these people and strange things talking to me, or at a doorway, or just weird mystical shit, like all growing up, like people delivering me messages. But the patterns that I've been able to develop now, some of those have become tools. Like I will intentionally try to get into that pulsing vibrational awareness, like as that's like a key level that I'm trying to get to where I'm trying to literally detach from my body to go other places. I want that vibration to build and build and build. To me, that's like separating, like 3, 2, 1 takeoff type of.
That's what I was getting at kind of before. There's like certain things even for myself that when I get up to that point, I know there's like a buildup that leads to that. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like you kind of like search for that to happen.
Instead of just, popping out until whatever's there and whatever happens, sometimes that does occur. But now it's like I go through that vibration, and then because of the gateway method and these other tools and experiences, like now I specifically go right to my energy conversion box. Then I go here, then I go there, and nothing happens unless it's on my terms in my waiting room, when and where I want it to happen. And so it all happens on my terms instead of just like falling into like Humpty Dumpty.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Have you ever wondered, like, if there's, and this is just my opinion, and I've just noticed it really the last few years, but it's funny how, because people always say stuff about like Christmas or the winter solstice, but for me, I have noticed, I do think if I want to try to get myself into that mindset, I don't know what it is, but for some reason, the beginning of the winter just seems like so fucking easy. It's almost as if it's like I could just close my eyes and just like shut off the world around me and like almost get going. And I was like, yo, is there something up with this whole like Christmas and winter solstice shit? I'm like, to me, it just seems like there's something going on then that makes it real easy for me to get into that, to get to that point. I don't know if you've ever experienced something where it doesn't have to be Christmas, just maybe certain times of the year work better for you.
I think if I explored that a lot more and was better at paying attention, I would probably definitely notice that a lot more. But I think it's definitely in the petroglyphs, and a lot of the ancient locations are totally tied to the solstices and different solar and star cycles and things like that, that would be like amplification points where the electromagnetic field of the earth and everything is totally peaked, or solar flares are peaked, or the energy, all that stuff is potent, and so there totally could be a lot to that, where there's alignments at certain places and times where you just feel like everything's in sync. We forget and take for granted a lot of things, just like the taking in the sunlight and coming off the end of summer and going into the different shifts of the season, that there's all these invisible energies and dimensions of reality and radiations around us from the earth moving and those seasons changing that totally affects us. Like inside of our ears and our whole sense of balance and how we know even which way is up and down is all based on these tiny little crystals floating in fluid in there, that tell us which way is up, and all that's super sensitive. And so I think we're these tiny little creatures, down here in this reality, or this whole experience that's connected to the whole universe that's full of cosmic energy and unknown quantum energies, and that we're connected to. So yeah, like just like a wave going up and down. And do you even ever feel like you'll go through periods of what I would call like forgetting or almost amnesia, where you just get lost in the matrix or lost in the sauce, and then all of a sudden you're just like, you realize you're like, my house is a mess, and like everything's piled up, and my bills and this or that, and you're like, I don't even remember the last time I did this or that, or I got a holy shit, and like it's all of a sudden like a balloon popping. You come back into presence and you realize like, man, I haven't meditated, and like I haven't done this, and like I haven't done yoga, or I haven't been to the gym. I've been eating like crap. Like, how did I get so far off track again? It's like you have to like come up out of that wave again and like come back up from the deep and remember. And like, I think we just go through those cycles, and like the more that you pay attention and try to get a grip to where those things happen on your own terms, that's part of what we're doing and learning here,
Well, I guess like if there was a peak time to do that stuff, maybe there'd be like the opposition to that. And for all you know, that could be why we cycle into things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, women have a cycle where that goes on, and we have different, cycles and testosterone cycles and all of that.
That is
I mean,
true,
it's totally connected. I know for a fact when I moved from like Idaho, where it was like a blizzard and snowing most of the year, 8 months out of the year, you're digging out your driveway in the snow. When I moved down to southern Utah, like I felt way better. My body felt better. My all my joints, my chronic pain in my back, a lot of stuff straightened out for me. My health, my sleep apnea, like tons of stuff, just like getting in a better environment. It's like sometimes maybe you're just sort of in a stagnant pond and you need to get in some fresh water. You know what I mean?
Nice. Good. One other thing I did want to get into, just a little bit. We don't have to get too crazy with it. And then we'll probably end it with this, but unfortunately, we didn't get to Mount Wilson. But I really did enjoy this talk. You know what I'm saying? And we're already like almost an hour in. But you mentioned astral travel, or kind of what's that other thing where you kind of like look in. God, I can't believe
remote viewing.
Yes, remote viewing. How the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have experiences with that, doing stuff like that.
Sir. Yeah, I've tried to film that a few times. I feel like
how would you film that?
Huh?
How would you film that? How would you pull that off?
So basically, there's a website, like my friend of mine, Daz Smith. He's like a professional remote viewer. He does it. He gets paid to do it. People pay him to predict what Bitcoin's going to do. And so he predicts futures and the coin markets and all that stuff for a living. Plus he does other contract work and things like that. But I'm friends also with Paul Smith, who lives not far from here. He's a remote viewer. But like the way that Daz has like a website where you can do practice remote viewing, where you can go to his website and there's like these practice targets to where they're professionally put together. You don't know what they are. There's just like a whole list of numbers. And so you just pull up the website and randomly look and pick a 4-digit code. It might be like 7249 or something like that. So then what I'll do is go into the protocol and take like dry erase marker or an art book or something like that, that I'm going to work with my pencils or something. And I go into the meditative state. And what I do is just go into like a free association. It's this thing like my mom used to have me do when I was a kid. So this part of it came really natural to me, like to help me with my school and my writing. I was a little bit dyslexic. So she would say, put your pencil down on the paper. And as soon as your hand starts moving to write the first word, just let it go and don't stop moving and just write the story like you're watching a movie. And just keep writing and writing until you get to the bottom of the page. And so I would that was kind of my first version of just free associating, seeing some story happening somewhere in my mind, and then I'm trying to write it down as it goes, sort of a thing. It's very similar. But this is like pinned to these numbers. So then I have the 4-digit numbers, and I'll start with those and I'll just write those down. And as soon as I get to the last number, it goes off into like a weird squiggle line. And immediately I get these impressions like the little swoop is a person, and that the reason that the line went up and then over is because he's standing at the bottom of like at the front of a building. And it's just like this impression that I get, almost like a sense of like being in the city and there's a building there and there's a person there or people there. So then I draw the number down again and the swoop goes, and it's like almost the same, like a glyph comes off. And then I go deeper and deeper, and sometimes I'll do several pages, and then basically when you get to the end, you go back to Daz's website, you click on the 4 numbers and you see what the target actually was, and you look at all your drawings and it's like, holy shit. Okay. What I did was drew a whole bunch of pictures of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but it was really like the Eiffel Tower. I was super close, but I just got the wrong spot, and like that's kind of how you learn stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Holy shit. Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't think you could. Guess you can film it. That's pretty.
Yeah,
that's pretty.
So like you could create like a remote viewing target, and like you could like take pictures that had to do with like the Roswell crash, for example, or something like that. Like, and you could put all this information, and if you did it right, put it in an envelope and then just write numbers on the outside of it. And then you could text me those numbers, and I spend like 2 or 3 days on it, tell you what I came up with. And then you're like, holy shit, yeah, it was the Roswell crash. And we just see what matches. The idea is you do that as a team. So imagine you give that number to 10 different people. None of them talk to each other. And then at the end of like a week, everybody turns their information in, their remote viewing results. The packet gets opened and you see what all matches, what all 10 of them saw. And sure enough, now you know like where the missing person is or whatever.
Holy
so that's
shit.
like, that's how they do it.
Wow, that's interesting. And so you've had experiences with that.
Yeah, I dabble with it and do the gateway method on top of it and all of that. And a lot of it is more like exploring for artifacts, looking for ruin sites, trying to follow intuition to see where there's tunnel entrances or energy going here or there, where to look. And
Oh, wow.
a lot of times it gets interesting, just kind of like being like almost like a human dowsing rod, walking around trying to find things, stuff like that. So, yeah.
That's wild. I figured most people would be like, yeah, I was like, trying to get like a combo for like a lock in a bank or something. You know what I'm saying? And you're like looking for artifacts and shit. But it's just, it's
some of the stuff that you've done like that, you wind up in weird situations. Like I got curious one time poking around like Area 51 stuff, like remote viewing around Area 51. And it was almost suddenly like I wound up in a room, like I was being interrogated. Like I wound up literally in a white room I couldn't get out of. And there was this is while I'm remote viewing, and I feel like I'm trying to explore around like these underground bases and things, looking for things, and then all of a sudden I'm like turn a corner and I end up in this room. There's no doors, and all of a sudden I can't control where I'm going. It's like I'm in a chair with a table and there's a person in front of me, and they're like doing these experiments, like connect the red wire to the red peg and the blue wire to the blue peg. And it's like I forget what I'm doing and where I was going. And then so I don't know. It's like, do they have some kind of a psychic defense?
I was gonna say,
I literally got like stopped, and
I was gonna joke and be like, maybe they knew you were looking.
I had one experience.
That's some wild shit though that you said. Dude, I was thinking
the scariest one I had was when I was filming with the History Channel in January, when they came to do the first season for Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. When we got ready to run our first like experiments up there, I got a phone call on my phone from an unknown number, and I thought that it was just somebody on the film crew, because I was like, oh, it's somebody needs something that I don't know that got my number. So I answered it. Mm-hmm. And I'm standing in the lodge at Mount Wilson by the fireplace in there. And this guy on the phone, I'm not going to say who he is, but he basically remote viewed me. He told me what I was wearing, what room I was in, where I was at, said that they had a satellite positioned over to keep an eye on what we were doing and all this stuff, like at Mount Wilson. And so I remote viewed him back. I started describing his office, the tie he was wearing, what was on his bookshelf, and the desk that he had. He like hung up the phone really quick. Then like 5 minutes later started texting me back. And like, so it's like, cause it's just like the stupid cat and mouse game. But the guys that were all up at Mount Wilson Ranch, like we didn't even get into that tonight, but it was Hal Puthoff and all the remote viewers and psychic spies that were looking for buried UFOs for Bigelow throughout the 90s, the whole 1990s and Skinwalker Ranch era. It's connected into all this. That's what they were doing. They're the guys that invented this stuff.
Wow. That's a wild fucking story.
It's crazy.
That's like Jedi mind tricks back and forth with.
It was.
Yeah, well, I know what you're wearing, bro.
No, that scared the shit out of me. I mean, I just took a shot at it. I didn't know if I was right. I was just started like saying, I was like, well, I like your this and that tie, and I like your tie clip and this. So I just started guessing, and I must have been pretty close because he got spooked and hung up, like it goes both ways.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is a wild story. I'm glad. Unfortunately, I mean, I we didn't get to Mount Wilson, but I'm glad we ended up having this talk. I thought this was great, actually. It was really, really interesting to me. Yeah, maybe in the future I would like, I know we did talk about a few things that we could get into for the show. I would like to eventually have you back on for that, but thank you very much. I really did think that this was a great talk. You know, I think it was a little bit out there, a little bit more, you know, outside the box, and I like having those conversations.
Speaking of boxes, do you have a box in your closet? Do you have stuff up in there?
Oh yeah.
Does it have something that your dad gave you?
Yeah. Recently too, not too long ago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Anyway.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, he
like
gave me
there's a
something.
reason I used that example earlier, like I was actually seeing something in there, but yeah, I don't know.
That's weird. Yeah, it was something. Yeah, recently, last time I saw him, he had brought me something of my mother's from when I was
Like
younger.
a sentimental thing.
Yeah. And I have it in a box in the closet.
You could keepsake thing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway.
Yeah. Carl, let everybody know where they can find your stuff, please.
Yeah, I appreciate it. If you go to my YouTube channel, Carl Crusher, in the description box of every video, I've got a link tree that you can find everything all the way from Mount Wilson to all my other work, my website, my Patreon to get all the behind the scenes and all of that. So that's the best spot for sure.
Awesome. And I'll definitely make sure I include all your links in the bottom. He has been on the show before. If this is the first time that you've heard him, definitely go back and check the Occult Rejects. I think he's been on at least 2 or 3 other times. The last time he was on the NY Patriot show, that was for Mount Wilson specifically. So go check that out if you're interested. And again, go check out his site. He's got tons and tons and tons of stuff on there that I think is very interesting. And, you know, not to, you know, promote it too much, but I think your Skinwalker ranch stuff was actually really, really good and really interesting. I think you can get a lot more of maybe an understanding of the high strangeness from watching his stuff actually on his channel. So I highly promote his Skinwalker ranch stuff. Carl, thank you again for coming on, man. It's always an amazing time with you, and I really love the deep conversations that we can have because we definitely can talk about meditation, and I love that. So thank you again, and definitely get you back on. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.
Appreciate it.